Hello YouTube, how are you guys going? I hope everyone out there is doing well. As you guys can probably tell looking behind me, it's getting pretty wintry here in Paris. It's in the middle of Sunday afternoon right now and it's already very dark and very grey outside. Today I wanted to have a chat about things that I found surprisingly cheap in France. And of course I'm not talking about $2 Thai street food cheap, but as in I'm living in Paris, in a big city, in a very developed, wealthy, kind of expensive country. And you know, compared to maybe London, New York, other bigger cities I've been to, I find this stuff incredibly cheap, and even in comparison to New Zealand actually. So the first thing that I find pretty cheap, very reasonable at least in Paris and in France in general, is the cost of transportation. So public transport. So in Paris we get around using the famous Navigo card, and this Navigo card will set you back 75 euros per month. Okay, maybe it's quite a lot of money compared to where you're from, but we get unlimited transport on all metros, all buses from zones 1 to 5 of the city, so we can get all the way out to the airport using this card. Don't have to buy extra expensive special tickets to get to the airport, which is really handy. And if you're working for a company in France, they actually legally have to pay for half of this card for you. So I personally only pay around 35 euros per month for unlimited transport all around the city. And then every big city seems to be really well equipped with trams, with buses, sometimes with metro lines, underground lines, like in Lyon, for example. So overall, I find it's really well equipped. Also, every major city has a bike hire system or electric scooter hire system as well. Super cheap. We're talking like 19 euros per year for an annual subscription to this kind of service. Obviously, it's so much cheaper for me to live in Paris and to use public transportation than it would be to live in Wellington and own a car and having to pay for the registration fees, having to pay for the petrol, repairs, maintenance, you name it. Now, the next one's maybe a little bit controversial, and I'll tell you why in a little bit, but I find the healthcare incredibly cheap in France. I don't think anyone can argue with that. Of course it's controversial because most French people tell me, yeah, but we pay for that. And that's absolutely true. We do, personally, I feel that we do pay quite high taxes in France compared to what I'm used to. However, look what you get for it. Basically, the state social security covers all emergency care, most, doctors, dental visits, all of that kind of stuff. You're usually reimbursed up to like 80, 90%, if not 100% in the majority of cases. Now, in certain situations, for example, if you need new reading glasses, you may only get a certain amount of money to spend. You're reimbursed up to 200 euros or this kind of thing. And if you want more advantageous policies, and if you would like to top that up and make sure that you're covered up to 100% whenever you go to the doctor, whenever you go to the dentist, that kind of thing, you take, of course, a private health insurance. Now, I find this private health insurance incredibly cheap. It depends on which company you work for if you're working, because they do negotiate deals with the insurance providers. But I personally pay 25 euros per month for my private health insurance. What this means is that I have up to 600 euros to spend on new glasses and frames, for example. I've never paid for a dentist, a doctor. If you get referred to specialists, for example, dermatologists, gynecologists, this kind of thing, fully reimbursed. Now, my partner, on the other hand, pays more like 45 euros per month because he's in a different company, so it does depend. Or his mother, who's retired, she actually pays 80 euros per month. She's not working, she's retired, and she pays more money than we do for her private health insurance. However, in the grand scheme of things, 80 euros per month, I think, is very, very reasonable for private health insurance. And to know that no matter what happens to you, especially if you're in an emergency situation, if you get a long-term illness, this kind of thing, you're so well covered in France. The next thing I find super cheap in France is a gym membership. So gyms here are very cheap to what I'm personally used to. The kind of entry-level gym in Paris, so you've got sites all over Paris city centre, is Neoness, and we're talking about 25 euros per month to both access the gym and go to all of the group fitness courses. So you've got like all of the Les Mills courses, body pump, you've got boxing, you've got Pilates, you've got yoga, you've got all of that kind of thing, around 25 euros per month. In New Zealand, we'd be paying about the equivalent of probably almost 15, 20 euros per week for the same service. The next one isn't really good for the planet, but it's extremely cheap. It's bottled water in France. So you can literally get 6 big bottles, so maybe 1.5 litre bottles of water in a pack for €2.30. In the supermarket, you can buy bottled water, big bottles like this, 1.52 litres, 80 cents. It's incredibly cheap, and I'm not sure why. Of course, this isn't the case if you buy it in, for example, a train station or in a cafeteria. You'll end up paying €2-3 for a bottle of water, so always go to the supermarket. But once you hit the supermarket to get, sparkling water, bottled water, it's incredibly cheap. Another thing that I find super cheap, and this is probably just completely normal all across Europe, but if I have any Australians, New Zealanders watching, it's phone and internet. So, to give you guys an idea, we have a landline phone for which I can make unlimited calls for free all across France and the world to landline. So I call New Zealand for free, no problem whatsoever. Plus our high-speed internet, plus my mobile phone in which I get 15 gigabytes of data on it per month, free calls, text, unlimited, whole package. We pay about €40 per month. That is super cheap. But us in New Zealand, we haven't even figured out unlimited internet on cell phones yet. We just don't have the competition, I think. We've got a few companies that kind of monopolize the whole industry, and so they can basically charge what they want. Another thing that is super cheap in France is the education. So of course, sending your kids to school, primary school, high school is free. I think that's the same in most developed countries. Correct me if I'm wrong. However, it's when you get to university where it gets interesting. So public universities, we're talking like 400 to 600 euros per year to attend university. That's it. And most of the time those fees include your social security for students. So again, your health coverage, you've got some enrollment fees, that kind of stuff, but it's not actually funding the education itself, which is why it's so cheap. In New Zealand, the average school year probably costs more around 4,000 or 5,000 euros per year, more like the UK, so to speak. The next thing that I find super cheap is the electricity. Because France has so much nuclear electricity, it definitely brings the price down compared to what I'm used to. In New Zealand, they have 90% renewable electricity sources. So it's maybe, better for the planet, but we definitely pay for it. And in France, I think, given I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment in Paris, so it's not the biggest possible space to heat, but our electricity bill averages around 40 to 50 euros per month. When we were in our small studio, it was around 25 euros per month. So there's both the electricity itself and the fact that over here, it's just a different mentality when it comes to electricity. It's extremely rare to come across a tumble dryer in France, for example. Tumble drying your clothes is generally avoided. If it's cold, you put on more clothes. You don't have the heat pump absolutely cranking and this kind of thing. So I think there's both a mentality thing and the price of electricity, which just keeps the cost very, very low. Another thing that's notoriously cheap in France, which kind of makes sense, supply, demand, is the wine. Apparently French wine is incredibly cheap. I've heard maybe like 6 euros per bottle, something like that for a good one. And I'm saying apparently, and I don't know what I'm talking about really because I don't actually drink alcohol. But all of my friends and family who visited like, oh, it's so cheap, the alcohol here. So that's a bonus. So that's what I had on my list today for the surprisingly cheap things in France. If you guys want me to do a video on the surprisingly expensive things in France, I'm more than happy to do that as well. Let me know if you'd be keen for that video down below. And if you haven't done so already, please think about giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel if you aren't already. I'd love to have you part of the community. I release new videos every single Wednesday. So that's it for this time, guys. I will see you guys next week in another installment of Not Even French. And until then, I'll say bisous and à bientôt.